On the day Andrew was officially recognized as a legitimate member of the family, I personally came to offer my congratulations, just as I had in my previous life. This time, I brought along 6 strong bodyguards. His entire family warmly held my hands, acting as if I were their most cherished daughter. "Let me introduce her to everyone." His father, Mr. Carter, said with a beaming smile. "This is Emily Lynn, the heiress of the Lynn Corporation." His mother immediately added, "And she's also going to be the future daughter-in-law of the Carter family." Even his sister-in-law, Joanna, gave me a sweet smile and said, "You're here. Our whole family is so happy to see you." In my previous life, they had treated me exactly the same way, surrounding me with sweet words and clever traps, making me believe Andrew's indifference toward me was simply because he was introverted and overly sensitive. I thought his coldness stemmed from pride, and I was determined to win him over, even if it meant enduring scolding from my family elders. I spared no effort, using every resource at my disposal to help him succeed. Andrew never refused my help, but years later, when my family faced a major crisis, not only did he refuse to assist us, but he also joined hands with our competitors to destroy us. I will never forget the day he came to acquire my family's company. My father, barely holding on, finalized all the paperwork and suffered a fatal heart attack in the elevator on his way out. As I held my father's lifeless body in despair, the elevator doors opened to reveal Andrew, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He looked down at me coldly and said, "Miss Emily, your support has fallen. Now, do you want to be my wife or a ruined woman? The choice is yours." That moment felt like a bolt of lightning had struck me. I couldn't believe the ruthless, unfeeling man standing before me was the same boy who once showed me his vulnerable and helpless side. When I rejected him, he retaliated by pressuring my creditors to harass me, leaving me with no peace until I had no choice but to beg him for mercy. We were married for 8 years. During that time, Andrew never touched me, no matter how much effort I put into caring for the household or trying to prove my worth. One of the rooms in our home was dedicated entirely to a shrine for his first love, Sarah. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., he would insist that I light incense for her. Afterward, he would stay in the room alone for a while. I secretly eavesdropped a few times and heard him say things like, "Sarah, he deserves to grovel like a dog. If only you were still alive, we wouldn't have to torment each other like this. We would have been the happiest couple." I never understood what I had done wrong. Every time I tried to uncover the truth, his entire family would unite against me, accusing me of being a villain, blaming me for Sarah's death, and calling me an unrepentant sinner. But I genuinely didn't know what had happened. On the day Sarah jumped into the sea, I was busy organizing Andrew's birthday party. I didn't even see the message she sent me, "Wishing you happiness," until after the party ended. That was the first and only time she had contacted me directly. Yet after her death, that message became the evidence of my alleged guilt. On our 8th wedding anniversary, Andrew asked me to drive him and Sarah's memorial tablet to a remote temple for a blessing. We had a car accident on the mountain road. I was trapped in the driver's seat, unable to move or call for help. Andrew, sitting in the back, wasn't as seriously injured, but he deliberately delayed rescuing me. He stood there and watched as the car caught fire. Moments before the explosion, I screamed at him in despair, asking what Sarah's death had to do with me. He looked at me coldly and said, "In your next life, be a better person." But there is no next life. Today is the 2nd day since I've been reborn. My gaze swept past all the charming faces in the room and landed on Andrew, who was hiding at the back, pretending to be aloof. Hatred surged through me, and the pain of my past life washed over me again. "Andrew, congratulations," I said with a sharp smile. "You've officially been recognized. The Carter family has finally accepted their illegitimate son." The atmosphere froze. His cunning father had only managed to secure his place in the Carter family by using me as leverage, claiming that Andrew and I had been college classmates and that I had pursued him passionately. That was the only reason he had the courage to confront his wife and force a reconciliation. Andrew's face turned crimson with embarrassment, his usually elegant features twisting as the color deepened. The lively atmosphere disappeared, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Mrs. Carter gave Joanna a subtle glance, Joanna immediately lowered her voice and asked, "Emily, did you and my brother have a fight?" I pulled my hand away from her grasp. In my previous life, before I married Andrew, I had always thought Joanna was a kind and simple girl. She didn't show hostility toward the sudden appearance of a half-brother. Instead, she seemed eager to get along with him. But later, I realized she was a master manipulator, even better at scheming than her mother. On the surface, she wished for me and Andrew to be happy together. But behind the scenes, she feared that with my family's support, Andrew would secure the inheritance rights to the company. She constantly schemed against us. After my family collapsed, she was the first person to kick me while I was down. Even after Andrew and I got married, she was the most frequent visitor to our home, always looking for ways to sow discord. Don't call me sister-in-law. You can't afford to ruin my reputation. I brushed past Joanna and walked straight toward Andrew. He stood tall, more than a head higher than me, with deep, unreadable eyes and lashes so thick they cast shadows on his face. He always had that brooding look, as if hiding secrets too heavy for anyone to uncover. "They all say I'm your girlfriend," I said, tilting my head slightly. "I'm a little busy, so tell me, am I?" In my previous life, this point in time, Andrew always kept our relationship ambiguous. He neither accepted nor rejected me outright. It wasn't until I handed him a $30 million project to secure his foothold in the city that he finally admitted I was his girlfriend. Andrew glanced sideways, looking left and right as if searching for something or someone. Then, with a faint, almost indifferent tone, he countered, "What do you think?" I understood immediately. Someone in this room cared about his answer more than I did. Was it Sarah? I didn't see her anywhere. Hiding in some corner. Perhaps? So, is it a yes or no? I pressed, my voice sharp. Be straightforward. Joanna rushed over, laughing awkwardly to defuse the tension. "Oh, Andrew, don't be so shy. Emily wants to hear you say it loud and clear. Come on, don't be like a block of wood." Mrs. Carter, Andrew's stepmother, also joined in with a smile, encouraging him to answer. After a long silence, Andrew finally spoke. His gaze met mine, and there was a flicker of resentment in his eyes. "Yes, you're my girlfriend." I clapped my hands together in mock surprise. "Oh my, I knew there was a misunderstanding. I don't like you and never wanted to be your girlfriend." The entire Carter family turned to look at me, their expressions synchronized with confusion, then turned back to Andrew, their faces mirroring the same disbelief. "You're all crooked from the top down," I said, shaking my head. "Don't mention my name again. It's filthy." I strode over to Mrs. Carter, giving her a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. "Your husband's illegitimate son is older than your daughter. That must sting. Be careful. One day the father and son might join forces to set you up." With that, I turned and left the room, flanked by my bodyguards, walking out of the hall with my head held high. Just as I was about to leave the estate entirely, a girl dressed incongruously for the occasion ran after me, spreading her thin arms to block my path. She was trembling from head to toe, clearly terrified. "I want you to apologize to Andrew," she stammered, her voice shaking. It was Sarah. I scrutinized her for a few seconds and then asked, testing her resolve, "Do you think this is touching?" She lifted her chin stubbornly, tears welling in her eyes, and stared at me without responding. I sighed, exasperated. "Why should I apologize? Give me a reason." "No one can choose their origins," she replied, her voice trembling but determined. "You insulted him because of his background. That's your fault. You owe him an apology." Ridiculous. I looked past her at the guests who had started to gather behind me, then fixed her with a cold glare. "He couldn't choose his origins. Sure. But does that mean he can't die?" The moment those words left my mouth, the expressions of everyone around me shifted drastically. Only Mrs. Carter and her daughter revealed a glimmer of satisfaction in their eyes. "How can you be so cruel?" Sarah asked through tears, her voice trembling with emotion. Andrew rushed over to her in just a few quick steps, his eyes filled with a hint of pity. "Sarah, stop it. Someone like her could never have empathy." I laughed coldly. "Andrew, your very existence is an insult to the rightful wife. If you truly had any empathy, You wouldn't have gone through with this whole family reunion charade. Remember this. Every time I see you, I'll make sure to humiliate you. With a wave of my hand, I signaled my bodyguards to push the two of them aside. I walked a few steps away but suddenly stopped, as if remembering something. Turning back, I smiled mockingly at Joanna. Don't worry, Joanna. You're the legitimate daughter. If you ever run into trouble, you can always come to me for help. Hearing her name, Joanna froze and instinctively glanced at her father before lowering her head slowly. Her mother responded on her behalf. Emily, I know Andrew must have done something to upset you. I'll scold him for it later. Please don't be angry anymore. Okay. Sarah cast a worried glance at Andrew, then lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. Andrew seemed to take her reaction as a cue. He stepped closer to me, lowered his gaze, and muttered, So I didn't respond to your messages for 2 days. Fine. I'm sorry. Can you stop making a scene? He had never been prompt in replying to my messages. In my previous life, I had grown so used to it that I didn't even mind anymore. I had told myself it was because he had a difficult life and an introverted personality. I thought if I gave more and sacrificed more, it would eventually break down his walls and soften his sharp edges. But all it did was trap me in a toxic cycle, leaving me obsessed with fixing him. If you're truly sorry, I said calmly, then kneel and say it. Andrew let out a cold laugh, his voice low and bitter. I knew you've always looked down on me. Are you done playing games? So, get lost. Get out of here. Is that your limit? What if I called you a little bastard? Andrew lunged at me, his face contorted with anger. But my bodyguard stepped in and restrained him just in time. Unbothered, I adjusted my coat and strolled away. The Lin family, a prestigious lineage with a 100-year history, had fallen because of internal decay, rats eating away at its core. Meanwhile, Andrew's Carter family was nothing more than a nouveau riche clan that had ridden the wave of a favorable era. In my previous life, I had been blinded by foolish sentiment, giving them the chance to leech off my family's resources. Now that I've returned, everything starts anew. My priority is to prevent the Lin family's decline. And as for Andrew, my revenge will be swift and surgical, using the tools at my disposal. After leaving the Carter estate, I got into my car and began reviewing the video recordings my bodyguards had captured. Miss Lin, they've arrived. My bodyguard in the passenger seat said. I glanced out the window and saw 2 full buses parked not far away. From them emerged a bustling crowd of Andrew's relatives on his mother's side, all smiling brightly as they made their way toward the Carter family's gated community. The sight startled the security guards, who spun in circles nervously before finally remembering to call for backup on their walkie-talkies. It's a pity Andrew's mother had been sent overseas. Otherwise, this would have been even more entertaining. I allowed myself a moment of regret. A few cars parked along the road had reporters inside who couldn't resist the spectacle. Camera lenses began to poke out of the windows, capturing the scene. The sunny weather was perfect for photos. With all this material, I'd make sure to spread the news far and wide, both online and offline. Andrew's mother's extended family, old neighbors, and acquaintances would surely be thrilled to see this. And of course, the rightful wife's sweet-talking uncles and aunts would need to be informed as well. Some of the uncles and aunts who regularly danced in the neighborhood square also lived nearby. They loved watching drama like this. Sarah had been Andrew's childhood neighbor and classmate. Her family was poor, and she nearly dropped out of middle school due to financial difficulties. It was Andrew's father who sponsored her education, allowing her to continue her studies. During college, Sarah attended a university in the same city as Andrew. The 2 schools were an hour and a half apart by bus. By all accounts, Sarah, coming from a struggling family, should have had no spare money. Yet, during her freshman year, she rented an apartment off campus, presumably to make it easier for Andrew to visit her. There were plenty of pictures of the 2 of them online, documenting their time together from youthful innocence to a more polished, mature image. Their clothes also became noticeably more expensive over the years. After graduating, Sarah joined the Carter family company before Andrew, using the pretext of repaying her benefactor's kindness. She worked as an administrative assistant and, over time, became a long-term employee. In addition to her base salary, A separate account would deposit extra money into her account every month. As I reviewed the compiled information on my phone, I organized my thoughts. In college, Andrew and I were in the same department. During the second semester of our sophomore year, I fell for him at first sight during a debate competition. Before confessing my feelings, I asked him and the people around him if he had a girlfriend. Everyone said no. That was when I decided to pursue him. Looking back now, I realize I had been played from the very beginning. Even more ridiculous was how the ever-gracious Joanna had been helping cover for them the entire time. All the while, I thought Andrew was a pitiful child held back by his parents. In my previous life, I never uncovered any of this, even until my death. Now, this newfound knowledge gave me plenty of material for exposure. A wave of well-edited leaks and revelations followed, meticulously timed. Within just a few days, Andrew's reputation was ruined in the social circles he had worked so hard to impress. Because of his clean-cut, pale, and slender appearance, people started calling him Little White-Eyed Wolf in online comments. Some who loved stirring the pot even fabricated outrageous stories about his past. Leaked records showing Andrew's father secretly sending him money over the years also surfaced, clearly orchestrated by Mrs. Carter. She had been closely following my lead and even amplifying my efforts. After I had someone tip her off that Andrew had planted a mole in their company, her attacks on him became even more ruthless. It seemed Mrs. Carter could tolerate infidelity in marriage, but she would never forgive having what belonged to her children taken away. Andrew should have thought harder about what made him believe he had the right to claim his place in the Carter family. By Friday, I heard that Andrew had moved out of the Carter estate, in front of Mrs. Carter's family and friends. He swore never to use another cent of the Carter family's money. He even relinquished ownership of all properties under his name. On top of that, Sarah had been fired from the company, and Andrew personally escorted her back to her hometown. I was in a fantastic mood. I even felt a sudden urge to invite Joanna out for a meal to ask her for all the juicy details. But I restrained myself. Surprisingly, Andrew couldn't hold back and came to my house instead. It was pouring rain. He stood outside the iron gates of my villa, his face marred with visible scratches and bruises. The butler, wary of letting him in, held firm while Andrew shouted my name over and over, his voice desperate like a starving stray dog. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window on the second floor, holding a steaming cup of coffee, quietly watching him make a scene. It wasn't until he finally noticed me standing there that I nodded for someone to let him in. When we met face to face, he sneezed loudly, completely drenched from head to toe. His eyes and nose were red, making him look pitifully weak. I waited for him to speak, but he just stared at me intently, as if deliberately trying to evoke my sympathy. After a while, I lost patience and let out a heavy sigh. This carpet is quite expensive. If it gets wet, it'll be ruined. You know. Are you going to pay for it if you ruin it? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Andrew widened his eyes in disbelief, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to find his voice. Finally, he asked, "Can you tell me why? What exactly happened? I don't want things to end between us so inexplicably." In my past life, I had gone out of my way to treat him well, only for him to respond with curt, stingy words. Now that I was eager to get rid of him, suddenly he had so much to say. Piqued my curiosity, I propped my chin on my hand, watching him with amusement. "How did you convince Sarah to play along? She's been your official girlfriend for years. Even when she saw the two of us getting close, she didn't seem to mind. Did you already promise her she'd be your mistress? Or maybe your side chick?" For years, I had openly pursued Andrew. I never kept it a secret. Even the stray dogs on the streets must have known about it. Yet Sarah had never once come forward to clarify her relationship with him. It was baffling. Did she think Andrew was a promising investment worth her sacrifice? At the mention of Sarah's name, Andrew quickly lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. His hands, hanging at his sides, clenched into tight fists. After a long silence, he finally seemed to find an excuse and croaked out, "It's not what you think. I've only ever seen Sarah as a sister. You know I've never had much family." He suddenly took 2 steps closer, his gaze unnervingly firm as he looked at me. "No one's ever respected me. It wasn't until I met you that I found a bit of confidence. Emily, I've realized these past few days that you're all I truly have. Sarah is just my sister. I stared at him coldly. Sister? Huh. She must have thought that purple is a very sophisticated color. My expression darkened, and I clenched my fists. Monroe, there's something filthy here. Help me get rid of it. As soon as I finished speaking, the butler and 6 bodyguards appeared. This had become a habit ever since Andrew had started harassing me. Now, I rarely went anywhere without security. Over the past few days, I'd worked tirelessly to ruin Andrew's reputation, not just out of revenge, but to ignite infighting within the Carter family and bait their competitors into taking advantage of the chaos. Sure enough, rumors and scandals swirled around him, and trouble soon came knocking. Mr. Carter found himself overwhelmed, his wife too busy fighting for power and moving assets to help him manage the mess. The company's leadership descended into chaos, and under mounting pressure, Mr. Carter suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized. His wife didn't even visit him, seizing the opportunity of a leaderless family to promote her own relatives to key positions. I had been keeping a close eye on their company. Naturally, I struck while the iron was hot, teaming up with outsiders to carve up their projects, poach their key personnel, and corner them from all sides. My moves were precise, ruthless, and efficient, leaving my father astonished. Why are you suddenly targeting the Carters so aggressively? Their company isn't that big, he asked one day. I shrugged. Just because of a breakup. Revenge. You know. He frowned deeply. That's not right. Relationships are mutual. If it's over, it's over. You need to have the grace to accept the consequences. His words made me smile, but I said nothing. I lacked experience, so it was a perfect opportunity to practice as their family was in turmoil. It would also prepare me for managing bigger projects in the future. With an air of righteousness, I said, "It's just normal business behavior. Nothing personal." Really? My father clearly didn't believe me, but since he had always been dissatisfied with how I had prioritized Andrew over my career, now that I was focusing on business, he fully supported me. Be steady in your actions and ruthless in correcting mistakes, he advised as I threw myself into identifying and rooting out the internal issues in our company to prevent future crises. Just as I was so busy that I had almost forgotten Andrew even existed. He showed up with his father to visit mine directly. My father, naturally suspicious, couldn't understand why they would suddenly come knocking. By the time I rushed home from work, the 3 men were sitting in the living room, forcing awkward smiles. The tension in the air was palpable. After a quick greeting, I sat down next to my father, only for him to lean over and quietly ask me, "Are you back with him?" Before I could deny it, Andrew, encouraged by his father's approving nod, suddenly knelt before me on one knee. He pulled a diamond ring from the inner pocket of his suit. "Emily, will you marry me?" My father's face darkened as he set his teacup down with a loud clink, his sharp gaze darting between me and Andrew. The pressure was suffocating. I immediately shook my head at my father, signaling that I had nothing to do with this. I didn't even know Andrew was planning this stunt. My father coughed, then turned to Andrew's father. Andrew's father quickly stood up, forcing a smile as he said, "Andrew and Emily have been in love for many years. Their feelings are deep. There were some misunderstandings before, but now Andrew is about to take over the family business. I promise Emily will never be wronged again." Andrew, his gaze unwavering, added, "I know you think I have ulterior motives, but I still want to try. I believe in your judgment, and I trust that you won't abandon me when I need you most. This is the best time to prove our love." His burning gaze made his intentions crystal clear. What he really meant was, "You want the best deal, and I'm the most suitable buyer you've found so far. Isn't that right?" I asked, "Is this about selling yourself for a good price?" Andrew faltered, his expression strained as if bearing a great burden. "I understand you. You value relationships more than anything else. I want to show you, through this gesture, that I won't let you down. From now on, we're family. I'm completely yours." At that, my father abruptly stood up and left without a word. Heading upstairs via the elevator, Andrew's father awkwardly tried to smooth things over, his forced smile faltering. "Uncle, Do you know about Sarah? I asked with a faint smile. Andrew's father hesitated before responding. What about her? He knew full well about Sarah's relationship with his son. He might have even been the one coaching Andrew, teaching him to emulate his own behavior of keeping one woman at home while entertaining another on the side. Sarah is your son's true love. I'm just the fool paying for everything. Don't let him keep hurting me, or I'll hold a grudge, I said softly, locking eyes with him as my smile deepened. He blinked rapidly, then turned to Andrew and, without hesitation, kicked him to the ground. Did you betray Emily? He roared. I had no intention of wasting any more time. Rising to my feet, I said coldly, That's enough. Joanna and her mother have already told me everything. Stop pretending. With that, I walked away, leaving behind a room filled with awkward silence. Those words weren't baseless slander, though they were skillfully coaxed out of Joanna and her mother by me. After delivering my parting shot, I left without looking back, taking the elevator up to the second-floor study to console my heartbroken father. I know you care about that boy, he began, his expression stern, his gaze sharp, but don't blame me for being ruthless. I won't allow the two of you to be together. Shameless people will stop at nothing. Stay away from him, or you'll face nothing but ruin. In the study, my father's face was grave, looking at the white hairs peppering his temples. I felt my emotions spiral out of control. He had said the exact same words in my past life, but back then, I was blinded by my infatuation. I lashed out at him, accusing him of being a snob who looked down on the humble Carter family. I even foolishly believed that Andrew's family treated me better than my own parents did. It turned out I had been too sheltered, too naive, unable to recognize the malice hidden in human hearts or distinguish genuine affection from manipulation. This time, I walked over to my father, knelt beside him, and leaned my head against his leg. Dad, you're right. I've learned my lesson. I won't give him another chance. He'll never rise again. Before he could respond, I quickly changed the subject, forcing a cheerful tone to dispel the heavy atmosphere. The greatest threat to any business is internal corruption. Regular self-audits are essential to prevent long-term damage. The Carter family is a perfect example of what happens when you don't. Look at the mess they're in now. Dad, we need to take their downfall as a lesson. We can't end up like them. Imagine us going to someone's house to propose and being thrown out. I hadn't blocked Andrew's contact information. He had a habit of sending me ridiculous messages, as if he were possessed by some tragic romantic hero. I found them amusing, using them as motivation to never forget the humiliation of my past life. Recently, though, he'd gone quiet, concerned that something was happening in the Carter family that I wasn't aware of. I discreetly had someone investigate his whereabouts. Few days later, I learned he was attending an investment promotion event. Sensing something suspicious, I cleared my schedule to attend as well. Ning Investment was a major player in the industry, and with Andrew's current standing, he shouldn't have been invited. Something was definitely up. When we crossed paths at the venue, I greeted him and the people around him with my signature polite smile. Hello, I'm Emily Lin from Shanghang Group. May I introduce myself? A man standing beside Andrew extended his hand for a brief handshake. He pulled out a business card, and we exchanged them. Hello, I'm Matt Fu, he said. The embossed card identified him as the president of Ning Investment. I couldn't help but study the young man in front of me more carefully. His striking features were bold and intense, with deep-set eyes that exuded a predatory charm. His relaxed, laid-back demeanor gave him an air of effortless authority, as if any room he stood in instantly became his living room. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Fu, I said smoothly. Now I understand why my father always speaks so highly of you. You're truly a role model for our generation. He laughed heartily, not even bothering to feign humility. Your father's insight is something we younger folks should aspire to. His nonchalant confidence was both intriguing and unsettling, but I kept my expression composed, hiding the flicker of curiosity that stirred within me. In the end, his words seemed more like self-praise than anything else. Mr. Fu, let's head to the office and continue our discussion, someone suggested. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but when Andrew saw me chatting with Matt Fu, A flicker of irritation flashed in his eyes. His tone carried a hint of anger when he interrupted. "We'll meet again later, Miss Lynn." Matt gave me an apologetic smile before turning to leave with Andrew. The two of them, both tall and imposing, exuded confidence as they walked away. Their striking backs were surprisingly complementary, almost a perfect match. Based on various investigations and what I knew about Andrew from my previous life, I could already guess what he was planning. However, playing the role of a hero who saves the day wasn't as simple as he might think. A high-stakes agreement? How could that be possible? Joanna fumed in frustration as we sat in a cafe. Who does Andrew think he is to make such a reckless decision? He's barely taken over the company. It's obvious he just wants to sell it off. I nodded in agreement. It's far too risky. A deal like this is akin to courting disaster. And besides, what makes him an illegitimate son, qualified to run the company? Who knows if he's secretly funneling assets elsewhere? Joanna gripped her phone tightly, her fingertips turning white. After a long pause, she looked at me with suspicion. "Emily, where did you hear this?" I smiled softly. The investor he's negotiating with happens to be my type. I might pursue him. With that, the rumors I wanted to spread were set in motion. Later that evening, I invited Matt Fu to dinner. At the table, he lounged in his chair with an air of casual elegance, gently swirling his glass of red wine. His long fingers tapped idly on the rim of the glass, and the tailored black shirt he wore accentuated his broad shoulders and smooth physique. "You invited me to dinner, yet all you talk about is Andrew. Why not invite him directly?" he asked, his deep voice tinged with amusement. "Do I look that free to you?" I forced a polite laugh. Extracting information was an art, and it was all the more challenging when the person across from you was a seasoned fox. "Fine," I thought. "Let's go with honesty." I took out a proposal from my bag and handed it to Matt. He opened it and, upon seeing the title, his brow arched slightly. He straightened in his seat as he read further. "Shared economy?" he remarked, his voice laced with intrigue. "Miss Lynn, this concept is quite unique. Very forward-thinking. It was just the advantage of being reborn. Mr. Fu, I trust your judgment. Are you interested in partnering?" "Miss Lynn, if you're starting a business, you likely have no shortage of potential partners. Why choose me?" "It's not about me choosing you," I replied, meeting his gaze as I raised my glass. "It's about whether you'll choose between Andrew and me. Pick one." My words were deliberate, measured. I wanted him to decide which project had greater value, which person was more worth his investment. I knew he was smart enough to figure it out. When we parted, light rain fell outside. Matt held an umbrella and walked me to my car. Our bodies were so close they nearly touched. As I opened the car door, he spoke in a low, velvety tone, his voice unexpectedly seductive. "He's not worthy of you." I paused briefly, smiled faintly, and said goodbye to him. The internal strife within Carter Corporation was severe, teetering on the edge of collapse. It had already become a topic of gossip within the industry. While I took advantage of the storm brewing in their family to clean up my own household, my actions appeared entirely justifiable. However, after uncovering more issues, my father refused to let me continue. He forcibly dragged me abroad to attend meetings. On Saturday, one of our foreign partners hosted a ball at their estate. My father, dealing with a headache, asked me to accompany a few senior executives in his place. I hadn't expected to see Matt Fu in the grand hall. He was dressed in a tailored suit, his tall frame and confident posture standing out amidst the crowd of socialites. He moved through the bustling scene with grace and ease, exuding an effortless charm. The classical music flowing through the room seemed to exist solely for him. I set down my wineglass and approached him. With a slight bow, I extended my hand in invitation. "Mr. Fu, may I have this dance?" His eyes lit up, and he returned the gesture with elegant composure. "It would be an honor." I placed my hand on his shoulder while his arm encircled my waist. Our hands clasped, and we moved in sync with the rhythm. The harmony between us was unexpectedly seamless. As the dance neared its end, the woman closest to me suddenly twisted her ankle, screaming as she fell toward us. Matt reacted swiftly, pulling me into his arms and out of harm's way. The woman collapsed unceremoniously at our feet. Feeling slightly embarrassed, I quickly bent down to help her up. However, she didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, she addressed Matt in fluent French, teasing, "Such a perfect opportunity for a hero to save a damsel in distress. How could you let it slip away?" Standing behind me with his hands clasped casually behind his back, Matt replied smoothly in French, his deep voice rich and melodious. "I didn't let it slip away. Thank you for the opportunity." The woman arched a brow, feigning disappointment before turning to me. In clumsy Chinese, she said, "Hello, beautiful." This small incident, unexpected as it was, lightened my mood. It reminded me that life could still be carefree and filled with joy. However, mindful of my father's health, I didn't stay at the estate too late and left early. Driving down the winding mountain road, I noticed a car suddenly appear behind me, tailgating aggressively as if it intended to ram into my vehicle at any moment. I immediately realized it was a deliberate act of retaliation. Recently, I had been investigating accounts and had fired several freeloading relatives and long-serving staff from the company. Though I had provided them with proper compensation, they remained dissatisfied. The memory of my death in my previous life, crushed, contorted, and obliterated in a violent explosion, flashed through my mind. My heart raced, but I clenched the steering wheel tightly, vowing not to meet the same fate again. Steadying my nerves, I floored the accelerator and maneuvered through several sharp turns. Just as I thought I had created some distance and reached for my phone to call for help, a blinding white light beamed directly at me from the front. I couldn't see anything. Panicking, I swerved the wheel hard. A split second later, a deafening crash echoed, and the car shook violently. The airbag deployed, slamming into me with force. Dizzy and disoriented, I couldn't afford to linger. I unbuckled my seatbelt, grabbed my phone, and stumbled out of the car. I staggered toward the woods, running as fast as I could. No matter what, I couldn't just sit and wait for death. Behind me, I heard the heavy, chaotic sound of footsteps. At least 2 people chasing me. I pushed myself to run downhill, dodging branches and stones, until a figure suddenly appeared from below. It was Matt. He had noticed something was wrong with the crash site on the mountain road, and immediately drove to the next curve, climbing up to find me. Before long, we made it back to the main road. I got into his car, and we sped away, having narrowly escaped death. I wiped the blood off my face and began laughing uncontrollably. "Are you okay?" Matt asked, startled. "Surviving a disaster means future blessings," I said, still chuckling. "Do you believe that?" Matt, "Believe? Sure. I believe whatever you say. You could tell me the sun's in the sky right now, and I'd believe you," he replied. I glanced at the bright moon ahead, its glow illuminating the night. Smiling faintly, I let out another small laugh. The car raced down the road, the ride far from smooth. At some point, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed. The police, Matt, my father, and others were all gathered around me. Andrew was reportedly on a plane and would arrive soon. After giving my statement to the police, I reached for my phone, but Matt suddenly spoke up. I froze mid-motion. "What's he coming for?" I asked. "Who knows?" Matt replied. "It's not like this has anything to do with him. Does he know how to treat patients or solve crimes?" My father chimed in with a sarcastic tone. "Exactly." But when he turned to Matt, his voice softened, and he smiled warmly. "Thanks to you, Matt. When you're back home, come to our house for dinner. Your aunt would love to cook for you." "Of course. I'd be happy to visit," Matt replied graciously. "How did Andrew even find out about my accident?" I asked, turning to Matt. He hesitated briefly before answering. "On the way to the hospital. You kept calling out Andrew's name. He was calling your phone at the same time, so I picked up. As soon as he heard about the accident, he insisted on coming over. It's obvious he cares about you." I vaguely remembered fragments of disjointed dreams. Andrew forcing me to kneel before Sarah. Him locking me out in the freezing cold one winter morning. His father making lewd comments about me while Andrew stood by silently. I also saw the breathtaking autumn sunset on the day of our wedding anniversary, just before Andrew left me behind to escape our crashed car. Be a good person in your next life. His voice echoed from every direction, repeating over and over. It wasn't until the car exploded that I was finally freed. When Andrew arrived, hurried and disheveled, my father didn't even bother greeting him before leaving, assigning a few bodyguards to stay and guard me. The air grew awkward, and Andrew seemed visibly uncomfortable. The doctor, standing nearby, hesitated to speak. Andrew fidgeted nervously, unable to bridge the silence. I didn't help ease the tension. Instead, I watched him coldly. After a long moment, he forced an unnatural smile. Are you okay? I shook my head slightly and replied in a distant, polite tone. Thank you for coming to see me. I'm fine now. You should go back, I said calmly. Andrew's smile stiffened on his face. If you're leaving, I can reimburse your round-trip ticket, I added kindly. For a moment, his eyes burned with anger, as though he wanted to retort, but he held back, turning away. He stood silently for a long time before speaking in a hoarse voice. Emily, don't forget. You were the one who came after me first. Don't bring up the past, I replied with a sigh, sounding almost tired. I find it humiliating too. He looked as though my words had hit him like a whip. You know, I continued, in life or death situations, it's easy for a girl to mistake gratitude for affection toward her savior. But Andrew, I already like someone else. From now on, please keep your distance. I don't want my reputation to suffer because of you. Andrew whipped around, the vein on his temple twitching. Emily, are you playing me? If that's what you want to think, I can't stop you. I looked at him with genuine sincerity, but the sight of his trembling frame made me quickly add, isn't Sarah the one you love? Don't worry, I won't bother you anymore. Take this chance to treasure her properly. He took a deep breath, his eyes swirling with storms of emotion. In the end, there was only a trace of desperation left. Emily, please, help me out this one time. I don't want to lose. Stop dreaming. A heavy silence stretched between us before his expression twisted with anger. Suddenly, he lunged toward me, arms outstretched. His face was contorted with rage. Before he could reach me, my bodyguards quickly stepped in, grabbing him by the arms and dragging him back. You be asterisk 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 asterisk. You turn your back on me just like that? What did I ever do to you? He screamed. His red-rimmed eyes filled with fury as he struggled against their grip. I stood unmoved, a faint smile playing on my lips as I watched him being dragged away. The Carter family's mess had already reached the point where they couldn't function without him. For Andrew to leave everything behind and fly abroad to see me, it meant he had already realized that staying was meaningless. I was his last hope, and the Lynn family was his only escape route. My suspicion was quickly confirmed when I learned that the Carter family's finances were on the verge of collapse and had attracted the attention of regulatory authorities. An audit could strike at any moment. In my past life, this was how the Lynn family fell too, which was why I had acted so urgently this time, even if it brought trouble upon myself. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital and flew back home. As soon as we left the airport, my father called Matt and invited him over for dinner. When I got home, Matt was already sitting on the sofa in our living room, chatting and laughing with my mother. The two of them seemed as close as a mother and son. Feeling slightly jealous, I rushed over and clung to my mother's arm like a spoiled child. Mom, I almost couldn't see you again. Her eyes turned red, and she hugged me tightly. You nearly scared me to death. You should thank Matt properly. If it weren't for him, how could I go on? Hearing her words, I suddenly remembered how, in my past life after marrying Andrew, my mother disliked him so much that she insisted on living alone. I wondered, when Andrew had heard about my accident, was there anyone by his side to comfort him? Or was he completely shattered, his heart broken into pieces? During dinner, my parents were so overwhelmingly warm toward Matt that it almost felt excessive. Under the table, I discreetly kicked Matt's foot and whispered, "Notice anything unusual?" Matt turned his head slightly, his eyes twinkling with amusement. What? I raised a brow. In situations like this, all you need to do is casually mention you have a girlfriend, and you'll be off the hook. He playfully ran his fingers through the strands of hair brushing his forehead, feigning innocence. Why would I want to escape? Your parents keep praising me. It's quite flattering. Don't you feel the same? After dinner, I walked Matt out, but before we could get far from the gate, we spotted Andrew pacing under a street lamp. He looked exhausted, with heavy bags under his eyes, though his beard was freshly shaven, and his clothes were meticulously neat. It was clear he had made an effort to appear presentable before coming to find me. Andrew's gaze darkened when he saw Matt. Matt shot me a complicated look, and I smiled faintly. Matt, lend me your arm for a moment, I said casually. Matt, ever the sharp observer, walked toward Andrew before I could say another word. Without hesitation, he gently brushed the stray strands of hair from my forehead, his expression tender and natural, before turning to Andrew as if nothing had happened. What brings you here, Mr. Carter? Andrew's eyes flicked between Matt and me. After a long silence, it was as if something clicked in his mind. He let out a bitter laugh and said, "So, Mr. Fu canceled the deal to please his lover. You two have been in cahoots from the start, haven't you?" "No, that's not true," I said hastily, meeting Andrew's gaze. For a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "It's not a lover," I said, dragging out the words with a mix of pride and mischief. "It's the girl he likes." Matt chuckled softly, his laughter carrying an ambiguous undertone. Worried he might undermine me, I clung tighter to his arm. "Though your accusations are off the mark, I don't mind how they sound," Matt said. "After all, business isn't personal. Don't lose hope, Mr. Carter. Perhaps there will be opportunities to collaborate in the future." Andrew's face twitched, realizing how poorly he measured up to Matt. After a moment of silence, he turned and began to leave. "Andrew," I called after him, "are you in trouble? Do you need my help?" He froze mid-step, standing still for what felt like an eternity before finally turning around. His pride had clearly taken a beating. "I just want to know," he said hoarsely. "Did you ever truly love me?" I sighed wistfully, as if regretting my answer. "I don't think I ever did." His pupils dilated, the truth striking him like a blow. "Your timing is unfortunate," I added, glancing at Matt. "My boyfriend is right here. Do you want to start an argument between us?" Matt interjected smoothly, his voice soft yet brimming with emotion. "Oh, we won't argue, but I do feel sorry for you, Miss Lin, having had to deal with someone like him." His eyes shimmered with a mix of light and warmth as he gazed at me. Andrew's shoulders slumped, and he lowered his head, looking utterly defeated. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. The Carter family declared bankruptcy shortly afterward. Andrew's father ended up in prison. Meanwhile, Joanna and her mother, sensing the impending disaster, filed for divorce just in time. They fled abroad with their money, leaving Andrew, the illegitimate son, with nothing but piles of debt. "Do you hate Andrew because of love turned to resentment?" Matt asked casually one day after a business meeting. I paused, caught off guard, before slumping back onto the couch with a laugh. "That's a bit dramatic," I replied. "I can't think of any other reason. You seem to care about him a lot. But all those little schemes of yours, you've practically driven him to ruin." Matt's curiosity was evident, his interest oddly persistent. "I did stir the pot a little," I admitted with a smirk. "I undermined his relationship with Joanna's mother, incited the company's higher-ups to oppose his promotion, fanned the flames of internal conflicts, and reported their fraudulent accounting practices. But none of that was because of love or hatred." Matt raised an eyebrow, his intrigue growing. "On the contrary," I continued, "it's because he hated me for no reason. I couldn't let him rise too high or gain too much. If I told you that Andrew becomes dangerous when he's rich, and it's safer for society when he's broke, would you believe me?" Matt chuckled, amused by my seriousness. "I'm telling the truth," I said, leaning forward. The saying "a wolf in the mountains becomes reckless when fed" fits him perfectly. Still, life hadn't been easy for me either. Investigating and cutting ties with those freeloading relatives in the company had upset them, and they found creative ways to pressure me into marriage. They kept introducing potential suitors, as if marrying me off would turn me into an outsider, severing my control over the family business. My mother, overwhelmed by hosting 3 waves of relatives a day, finally had enough. She pointed to Matt and declared, "My daughter already has a boyfriend in the investment world. They'll get married soon." The news spread like wildfire through the business community. I privately apologized to Matt, but to my surprise, he seemed quite pleased with the situation. "If you're willing," he said, "we can go to the marriage registry anytime." My treat. Terrified, I shook my head vigorously. The scars left by my 8 years of marriage in my previous life were still too fresh, too indelible. This time, I only wanted to live freely, following my own heart. Matt suddenly leaned in, his gaze burning into mine. In ancient times, saving someone's life meant you owed them your own. How can you be so ungrateful? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. We're business partners. You can either focus on money or romance, but not both. He straightened up, laughing softly. You're so smart. Why not do both? I hesitated, caught off guard, before eventually laughing along. Maybe it's worth a shot. I'm only in my 20s. Can't let the best years of my life go to waste. The shared economy concept I introduced gained massive traction in the market. Once it peaked, I quickly cashed out and exited the stage, leaving no regrets behind. From then on, I shadowed Matt, learning everything I could, and gradually grew into an independent investor, leveraging the insights and foresight from my previous life. I focused on identifying high-potential projects and helping talented but resource-starved individuals realize their dreams. In just a few years, I gained widespread recognition and made a name for myself, without relying on the Lin family as a shield anymore. I had become my parents' fallback for the future instead. Teaching a student too well might starve the teacher, and Matt sometimes felt like he was being taken advantage of. He'd occasionally get dramatic about it, but I had my own way of making him happy. I'd simply step forward and silence his complaints with a kiss. That never failed to lift his mood, and I quite enjoyed feeding his ego in such a pleasant way. At the end of the year, I traveled to a small third-tier city for business and unexpectedly ran into Sarah. She was unrecognizable from before. Her appearance had completely transformed, dressed in expensive clothes and radiating confidence. She seemed to glow with a newfound charm. On a whim, I struck up a conversation about Andrew. Why didn't you end up with Andrew? In my previous life, Andrew's hatred for me stemmed from Sarah's death. But in this life, after being separated from him, Sarah was alive and well. I was genuinely curious about the entanglement between the two of them and how I had somehow gotten caught in the crossfire. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then gave me a bitter smile. She explained, "Back then, I relied on Andrew for everything, emotionally and financially. I was terrified of losing him, and I couldn't imagine a life without him. To me, he was the one holding up my sky. Whenever I thought about him being taken away, it felt like my entire world was about to collapse." She paused, then continued with a tinge of regret. But I could never bring myself to tell Andrew about my fears. I knew he didn't have the patience to deal with my emotions. My world revolved around him, but his world was so much bigger. The only thing I had going for me was my obedience. So I always supported him unconditionally, even when he wanted to use you, even when he refused to give me a proper title, even when he sent me back to my hometown. I never complained. After leaving him for good, I realized the sky wouldn't actually fall. My world became bigger, and I didn't have to carry so much anymore. If I had stayed with him, I think my life would have only had two possible outcomes: either dying from suffocation or going insane from frustration. She looked at me apologetically. "Emily, I'm sorry. Back then, I should have spoken up, even if it was just to give you a heads up. Maybe you wouldn't have wasted so much time and emotion on him." So that was the truth. In my previous life, Andrew had shamelessly juggled two relationships, completely disregarding Sarah's feelings. Sarah, his supposed first love, could only watch from the shadows as Andrew flaunted our seemingly perfect relationship. She swallowed all her pain and resentment until she couldn't take it anymore, and chose to end her life by jumping into the sea. Unable to accept her death, Andrew shifted all the blame onto me. In his mind, I should never have existed, never have tempted him into wrongdoing. He built a moral pedestal in his heart, casting judgment on me, another victim, just to deceive himself. He told himself that he had truly loved Sarah, that he was forced into his actions, and that he would never forget her for the rest of his life. He needed to believe he was a good man, a romantic soul. Fortunately, this time around, both Sarah and I escaped unscathed. Meanwhile, Andrew's life fell apart. He was penniless, homeless, and constantly on the run. At his lowest point, debt collectors broke his legs and threw him into the sea, leaving him on the brink of death. It wasn't as if he hadn't tried to seek my help. He had staked out near my company building and even my home, but I managed to avoid him every time. Later, as the gap between us grew too vast, he couldn't find any information about me anymore. However, I could always keep tabs on him. For example, I recently learned that he had taken a job as a rideshare driver. Unfortunately for him, a kid had stuck a sticker on his license plate without him noticing, and when he drove off, his license points were completely deducted. I looked up at the distant sky with a small smile. Those who betray genuine love, how could they expect a happy ending? On my 30th birthday, Matt proposed to me at a seaside hotel. Months earlier, I had already discovered the prenuptial agreement he'd prepared. I knew what he was planning and had given it considerable thought. By then, I had my answer, but when the moment finally came, I summoned all my acting skills to feign surprise, delight, and even panic before slowly shaking my head. With a tinge of sadness, I said, "You know I don't like marriage contracts. I don't like being bound by responsibilities." He remained on one knee for a long moment, stunned. Then, without warning, he stood, grabbed my arms, and kissed me. The scent of plum wine lingered on his lips as he murmured indistinctly, "Then do you like me? I want a title. I need one." Leaning back, I couldn't help but laugh and scold him. "Stop acting like this. You're behaving like a child begging for candy." He let go of me, but the dangerous glint in his amber eyes only grew stronger. "Fine, fine," he said, his tone low and magnetic. "No more childish games. Let's try something more mature." His eyes smoldered with intensity as his long fingers deftly untied his tie. First, he wrapped it around one of my wrists, then the other, binding them together and raising them above my head. He leaned down, his chin resting on my hair, his body radiating heat. "Emily, listen to me carefully," he whispered, his voice deep and commanding. "I'll give you love and freedom. Take it. Enjoy it. Love is fleeting and unpredictable, impossible to guard against. Perhaps it's better to embrace the emotions of the moment and cherish the rare, impulsive feelings that become harder to find as we grow older." With a hoarse voice, I agreed. By late spring in May, the Lin family hosted a grand wedding, lavish and filled with notable guests. Dressed in a flowing wedding gown with a long train, I walked through a path lined with blooming flowers. Under the gaze of family and friends, I approached the groom, Matt. His eyes were red as he gently took my hand and kissed it, a single tear slipping from his lowered gaze. But when he straightened, his expression lit up with a dazzling smile, bold and full of life. "I told you," he said with a teasing grin. "A life-saving favor demands a lifelong repayment. There's no escaping." My wife.
When my sister and I were still in our mother's womb, our grandfather arranged 2 childhood engagements for us. One was to Ethan, the grandson of his late comrade in arms. The other was to Nathan, the son of a wealthy businessman. We were originally going to draw lots. My sister would marry Nathan, and I would marry Ethan. But who would have thought my sister found Nathan not handsome enough and insisted on marrying Ethan instead? I had no choice but to take her place and marry Nathan. After we got married, the Nathan family's business flourished, and as the young madam of the Nathan household, I became more and more admired, glamorous, and successful. My sister, after marrying Ethan, discovered he was just an ordinary junior military officer, rigid, dull, and broke. Watching me live so well, she grew resentful. At our grandfather's birthday banquet, she stabbed me to death, screaming furiously that Nathan should have been her man, that I had stolen her life, and that she hated me. A sharp, searing pain burst through my abdomen. I looked down and saw her hand, clutching the handle of a fruit knife, buried entirely in my stomach. The music of the birthday banquet and the cheerful laughter of the guests continued in the background. No one noticed the tragedy playing out in this quiet corner. "Nathan should have been mine. You stole my life. I hate you. she screamed, her eyes wild with a madness I had never seen before. She yanked the knife out in one swift motion, and blood sprayed across the pink dress she had carefully chosen. I collapsed to the ground, my vision starting to blur. The last thing I saw was her twisted smile, and Nathan's panicked figure running toward me. When I opened my eyes again, we had both returned to the day of our 20th birthdays, the very day Ethan and Nathan were to visit with marriage proposals. This time, my sister rushed to say she wanted to marry Nathan. With a smug look, she told me, "Now it's my turn to marry the rich and powerful one. You can spend your life miserable with that cold, penniless loser." "Hannah, wake up, Ethan and Nathan are almost here." My mom's voice jolted me awake. I was sitting at my vanity in my room, staring into the mirror at my 20-year-old face. My fingers trembled as I reached down to touch my stomach. No wound, no pain. "Mom, is today my 20th birthday?" I asked, my voice tight. "Silly girl, are you so excited about your birthday that you're confused?" Mom laughed as she adjusted my collar. "Come downstairs, your grandfather is waiting." I pinched my arm. The sharp pain confirmed it. This wasn't a dream. I had been reborn. I was back on the day when everything changed. Downstairs, Grandpa was drinking tea with my dad. My sister, now dolled up and dressed to the nines, was already sitting on the sofa, perfectly made up. When she saw me, she gave me a loaded look. "Hannah," she said sweetly, "today's the big day. We're choosing our future husbands. And I already know who I want." My heart skipped a beat. That tone, that look. My sister had been reborn too. The doorbell rang. Mom led two young men into the living room. On the left was Ethan, in a crisp military uniform, his features clear and upright. On the right was Nathan, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, a luxury watch gleaming on his wrist. Grandpa grinned and said, "These are the two granddaughters I always talk about, Hannah and Bella. Years ago, I arranged engagements with old Ethan's grandfather. Today, it's finally time to make good on that promise." According to what had happened in my past life, we were supposed to draw lots next to decide who would marry whom. But this time, Bella spoke up immediately. "Grandpa, I want to marry Nathan." Everyone was stunned. Bella walked straight over to Nathan and easily linked her arm through his. "It was love at first sight for me. I only want to marry you," she said. Nathan looked a bit uncomfortable but still managed a polite smile. Grandpa turned to me. "Hannah, then you'll—" "I'd be happy to," I cut him off, walking directly toward Ethan. He stood straight and tall, his eyes clear and calm as he looked at me. A flicker of resentment passed across Bella's face before it quickly shifted back to smug satisfaction. She leaned toward me and whispered, "This time, I get the rich, powerful man. You'll just have to live a miserable life with that broke, icy guy." I looked her in the eye, my voice steady. "I wish you happiness." Ethan gave me a crisp, standard military salute. "Miss Hannah, I'll do everything I can to make you happy." His gaze was so sincere, it sent a tremor through my heart. He was nothing like how Bella had described him in our past life. Rigid, boring, and unremarkable. After the engagement ceremony, both families began planning the weddings. Bella was busy flaunting the lavish betrothal gifts the Nathan family had sent, while I quietly started learning more about Ethan's background. The Carter family wasn't wealthy, but they were known for their integrity and strong values. My mom told me that Ethan had already become a company commander at such a young age. His future was promising. My dad added that Ethan's father had passed away early, and he'd been raised by his mother alone. It was said that Mrs. Carter was upright, principled, and highly respected in their community. That was a far cry from what Bella had complained about in our previous life, claiming Ethan was a poor soldier from a backward family. The wedding was set for next month. Bella spent her days getting fitted for an extravagant designer gown, while I chose something simple and elegant. Whenever she bragged about the latest luxury items the Nathan family bought her, I would just smile and say nothing. "Aren't you jealous, Hannah?" she finally asked one day, unable to contain herself. I looked out the window at the sunlight streaming through. "Everyone has a different definition of happiness," she scoffed. "You'll understand just how important money is when you're stuck in that tiny old apartment doing laundry and cooking all day." On the wedding day, sunlight filtered through the stained glass of the church, casting soft colors onto the red carpet. I stood in front of the mirror as my mother adjusted my veil. Unlike Bella's bejeweled six-figure wedding gown, I had chosen a simple satin dress, adorned only with a soft, elegant floral embroidery around the waist. The Carter family kept things modest, but every detail was thoughtful and respectful. My mom tucked a fresh lily into my hair. Ethan asked what flower you liked. He had this flown in from Kunming this morning. The delicate fragrance of the white petals was refreshing and comforting. When the church doors opened, I took my father's arm and walked down the aisle. Ethan stood tall at the altar, his military uniform sharply pressed, shoulder lines so crisp they looked like they could slice paper. When he turned and saw me, his eyes lit up like stars sinking into the sea. "You look beautiful today," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly, not out of formality, but from something deeper. His gaze was so focused, it was as if the whole world had disappeared and I was the only one left. Even the tips of his ears were blushing red. The ceremony was simple and solemn. Ethan gently slipped a graceful platinum ring onto my finger, the inside engraved with our initials. As we exchanged rings, I noticed a thin layer of calluses on his palm, marks left by years of firearm training. "I will protect you with my life," he said during our vows, his thumb softly brushing the back of my hand. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the back of the church. Bella stormed in, wearing her extravagant wedding gown, followed by the Nathan family's wedding motorcade, 10 identical black Mercedes-Benzes. "Sorry I'm late, sis," she said in a sickeningly sweet voice. The Nathan sent 10 cars for the bridal escort, but the traffic was terrible. She deliberately waved her wrist, showing off the jade bracelet. "A family heirloom from my mother-in-law. She insisted I wear it today." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I noticed Mrs. Carter frowning slightly, but Ethan only smiled at me calmly, as if this entire scene had nothing to do with us. After the ceremony, Bella and Nathan paraded around the banquet hall, flaunting her 3-carat diamond ring from table to table. Ethan and I quietly sat at the main table. He patiently peeled shrimp for me, dipping them in vinegar before placing them on my plate. "You don't have to do that," I said, a little embarrassed. "I'm used to taking care of people in the army," he said with a soft smile. "And now, you're the only one in my home. I need to take even better care of you for the Carters." There were only 15 tables at our wedding banquet, but every dish had been carefully prepared. Mrs. Carter had made sure my favorite, steamed sea bass, was served first. It was clear she had done her homework. Bella's wedding, on the other hand, hosted 80 tables. I heard later that the leftovers filled 3 garbage bins behind the hotel kitchen. That night, we returned to our new home, an apartment assigned by the military. It was a 2-bedroom unit with simple but sturdy furnishings. Ethan came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Sorry, this place is a bit small," he said softly. I turned around to look at him. "It's perfect. It faces south and gets great light." His eyes lit up. Suddenly, he reached up to the top of the wardrobe and pulled down a box. "I got you a surprise." Inside the box was a beautifully bound set of military history books, the very ones I had casually mentioned wanting to read some time ago. I looked up at him in surprise. He scratched his head and said, "I saved the note in my phone, thought it'd make a good wedding gift." The next morning, before sunrise, I was still half asleep when I caught the scent of eggs frying. Reaching out, I realized the bed beside me was empty. I tiptoed into the kitchen and found Ethan wearing an apron, carefully flipping eggs. A pot of warm milk sat on the stove. When he saw me, he fumbled a little and quickly turned off the heat. "Did I wake you? You're up early." "I'm used to waking at 5:30 in the army," he said with a sheepish smile as he plated the eggs. "I wanted to let you sleep a little longer." The eggs were golden and crispy on the outside, exactly the way I liked them. That's when I remembered how, during the wedding banquet, he had quietly observed me taking only fully cooked eggs. After breakfast, Ethan insisted on doing the dishes. Sunlight streamed through the gauzy kitchen curtains, casting soft light on his face. His jawline looked like it had been drawn with a fountain pen. He caught me staring and smiled. "I'm taking you to meet my mom today. She's been talking about making soup for you." His mother lived in an old house on the military base. As soon as we stepped inside, the rich scent of herbal chicken soup filled the air. She gently pulled me down to sit beside her, studying my face carefully. "Ethan didn't bully you, did he?" "Mom," Ethan muttered, ears turning red. "He's been wonderful," I said, unable to stop smiling. "He even made me breakfast this morning." Her eyes lit up. "This boy's been caring since he was little. When he was 8, he could cook noodles and take them to the hospital for his dad." Then she suddenly fell silent, her expression dimming for a moment. I later learned that Ethan's father had died from injuries sustained during a mission. Ethan's choice to join the military had been deeply influenced by him. That afternoon, his mother prepared a full table of dishes and kept piling food onto my plate. As we were leaving, she pressed a red cloth pouch into my hand. "This was passed down to me by Ethan's grandmother. It's yours now." Inside was a simple orange jade bracelet, warm and translucent, clearly worn often and well cared for. "It's not worth much," she said, a bit embarrassed. I slipped it on immediately. "It's beautiful. Thank you, Mom." On the way home, Ethan held my hand tightly. At a red light, he suddenly spoke. "After my dad passed, my mom raised me on her own. She always said, a wife isn't a housekeeper. She's a partner, someone to face life together with." His words warmed me deeply. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a photo from Bella. She stood on the spiral staircase of the Nathan family's villa, behind her a wall of luxury handbags. "Jealous, Hannah?" she wrote, followed by a smug emoji. I locked my screen without replying. Ethan was at a street vendor's cart nearby, seriously inspecting roasted chestnuts like he was performing an important military task. "You said last time you liked these," he said, handing me a warm paper bag. I peeled one open and bit into it. It was sweet and fragrant, the taste filling my mouth with warmth. That evening, while organizing my wedding keepsakes, I noticed that the inside of the bracelet Ethan's mother gave me had 4 delicate characters engraved: peace and joy. Outside, Ethan was hanging the laundry on the balcony. The moonlight outlined his figure gently and clearly. Ethan never missed a morning, up by 5:30 sharp. I decided to match his routine. When I pushed open the kitchen door, Ethan was pouring hot water into a thermos. He looked surprised. "You're up early." "I wanted to make breakfast for you," I said, tying on an apron and taking eggs from the fridge. His lips curled into a smile. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Let me teach you. This old stove is tricky. Heat control's important." He placed his hand over mine, adjusting the burner knob. His breath brushed against my ear. In that moment, I couldn't help but remember how Nathan never once stepped into the kitchen. He always sat at the dining table, reading the paper, waiting for me to bring him coffee. My hands fumbled nervously as I tried to cook the eggs. The yolk broke apart, but Ethan ate every bite with relish. "You did better than me on your first try," he said cheerfully. I remembered how my first attempt at frying eggs back then had turned them into charcoal. After breakfast, he insisted on washing the dishes himself. "Weren't you going to the military base commissary to shop today? I'll drop you off on the way," he offered. On the way there, he told me in detail which stall had the freshest vegetables and which auntie sold the best cuts of meat. These little bits of information were things he had carefully remembered from each of his weekly trips home. After dropping Ethan off, I stood outside the commissary and took a deep breath. "You must be Captain Carter's wife," one of the smiling vendors said as she handed me a cloth bag. "Little Ethan called yesterday and told me you'd be coming. He asked me to save you a fresh bass." I stood there stunned. Ethan had thought even this far ahead. That afternoon, I followed a recipe on my phone and managed to make 1 dish and 1 soup. I'd added too much salt, but the sense of accomplishment was stronger than anything I'd ever felt, even dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant in my previous life. After lunch, I opened my notebook and started jotting down everything I remembered about the military system from before. In 2015, there would be a large-scale military drill. In 2016, new equipment would be piloted. Suddenly, my phone rang. Bella's overly cheerful voice came through. "Sis, I was doing a spa nearby your military district, so I thought I'd stop by and visit you." An hour later, a red Porsche pulled up in front of the family housing building. Bella stepped out, teetering on 10-centimeter heels, her eyes sweeping over our modest home. Her lips twitched. "Nathan insisted on buying me this car. Said it was a wedding gift." She jingled the LV keychain hanging from the keys. Sis, you don't even have a housekeeper. I handed her a cup of tea. I'm used to it. It feels comfortable this way. She suddenly leaned in. Is Ethan treating you well? Even under her thick foundation, I could still see faint dark circles under her eyes. He's great, I replied, pointing to the vase of fresh sunflowers on the windowsill. He brings home little things every day. Her smile faltered for a split second, then she quickly recovered and gave a smug grin. The Nathan family just bought me a full set of jade jewelry. They say it's a family heirloom. Her phone rang. When she saw the caller ID, her fingers trembled slightly. I have to go. My mother-in-law scheduled a mahjong game. She stood up quickly, knocking over the teacup with her Chanel bag. When I walked her to the door, I noticed a red scratch on the back of her neck. It looked like a rope burn. She caught my glance and quickly adjusted her collar. The cat scratched me, she said casually. Watching her retreat in such a rush, I fell into thought. In our past life, around this time, Nathan had already started seeing other women behind her back. That evening, Ethan came home with a request. A few of my teammates are coming over for dinner tomorrow. Is that okay? Of course, I said right away, pulling out my notebook. Any dietary restrictions? Favorites? He looked surprised as he scanned the list of notes I'd taken. How'd you know Captain Lee likes spicy food? You mentioned it once, I said with a small lie. In truth, I'd overheard it at a military banquet in our previous life. The next morning, I got up early and began prepping according to my notes. As the braised pork simmered on the stove, Ethan walked in with 3 of his fellow soldiers. Good afternoon, ma'am, the youngest among them said with a sharp salute. Brother Ethan's always bragging about your cooking. I smiled and invited them to sit. The skills I'd honed entertaining guests at the Nathan household now came in handy. I remembered every name and rank, refilled drinks and tea at just the right time, and kept quiet during their serious conversations. When it was time to serve the food, I made sure to consider everyone's taste preferences. Where did you find such a wife, Ethan? After a few rounds of drinks, the oldest one, Captain Lee, clapped Ethan's shoulder with admiration. She reads people better than the political office director. Ethan's ears turned bright red, but his eyes sparkled. I knew this dinner meant a lot to him. Captain Lee was one of the key evaluators for the upcoming promotion assessments. After the guests left, Ethan helped me clean up the dishes. Thank you for everything today, he said softly. Captain Lee said your food is better than the officer's guest house. I laughed as I dried my hands. I used to help my mom host guests at home all the time. That weekend at the commissary, I ran into Captain Lee's wife, Auntie Wang. Oh, Hannah. Old Lee hasn't stopped praising you since that dinner, she said warmly, taking my hand. She lowered her voice and added, the district has an inspection coming up next month to check training performance. How's little Ethan preparing for it? He's been working overtime every day, I answered with a smile. I pretended to be worried. I just don't know what the upper command is focusing on this time. Auntie Wang lowered her voice. Word is, this time they're focusing on night combat and information-based equipment operations. Later that day, back at home, I casually mentioned, I heard from someone at the commissary that 3rd Company's been training for nighttime shooting drills. Their scores are apparently really good. Ethan paused thoughtfully and gave a small nod. That night, he came home late and told me he'd stayed behind to run night tactical exercises with his unit. A month later, after the inspection was over, Ethan was recognized as the model officer for night combat operations. At the celebration banquet, his direct superior patted him on the shoulder and said, You were well prepared, right on point with the inspection's focus. Ethan turned to look at me, his eyes filled with both curiosity and gratitude. I lowered my head and focused on gnawing a rib bone. That night, before bed, he suddenly asked, How did you know they'd focus on night operations this time? I guessed, I said, setting down my book. Didn't the district just get new night vision equipment recently? They'd want to test its effectiveness. He stared at me for a few seconds, then chuckled. Hannah, you're full of surprises. Outside, the moonlight was soft like flowing water. I listened to his steady breathing beside me, but my thoughts drifted far away. Bella was probably lying in the Nathan family's massive king-sized bed. But was there anyone beside her? At 3 a.m., I jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat. In my dream, Bella held a blood-stained fruit knife, and behind her, Nathan stood sneering in the shadows. The moonlight outside was ghostly pale. Ethan lay next to me, sleeping soundly, his breath calm and even. I quietly got out of bed and went to the study. Turning on the desk lamp, I opened my notebook. Half of it already filled with important events I remembered from my past life. The drastic steel price drop in Q3 of 2015, personnel changes in the military district at the end of the year, a testing accident with new equipment. I circled one particular line: the regional military competition in September 2015. The next morning over breakfast, I asked nonchalantly, "Is training going smoothly these days?" Ethan set down his soy milk. "There's a confrontation drill next week. I've been studying topographical maps. My hometown has a lot of hilly terrain." I handed him a napkin. "I used to hike the mountains as a kid, know a few hidden trails." His eyes lit up. "Really?" Using memory, I sketched out the terrain behind Ethan's hometown and marked several herbalists' paths. "This creek dries up in September. You could use it as a hidden passage," I pointed out. "But be careful on the eastern slope. There's a loose rock section that can give away movement." Ethan studied the map for a long time before looking up. "Hannah, how do you know all this?" "I joined the orienteering club in college," I lied with a smile. "And my dad's a military history buff. We have a lot of books like this at home." 3 days later, Ethan didn't get home until very late. His eyes were gleaming with excitement. "We used your route today for a flanking maneuver. Took out the red team's command post. The brigade commander praised us on the spot." I helped him out of his mud-covered combat uniform. "Must have just been good luck." "No, it wasn't," he said, gripping my hand. "That warning about the rocky slope? You were right. There were red team sentries stationed there. We circled around from the downstream route." The kettle started to whistle sharply. I turned to shut off the stove, hiding the smile spreading across my face. That weekend at the commissary, Auntie Wang pulled me aside mysteriously. "I heard little Ethan did exceptionally well in the drill. Command's considering him to lead the cross-regional military competition." "Really?" I nearly dropped the basket of eggs I was carrying. On the way home, my phone rang. Bella's voice sounded thick, like she had a stuffy nose. "Sis, are you busy?" "Just finished grocery shopping. What's up?" There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, "Nathan hasn't come home for 3 days." She suddenly started crying. "My mother-in-law says I'm useless. Can't even keep my husband around." I stood on the roadside under a sycamore tree, watching sunlight filter through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across the pavement. "Maybe his company is busy with a new project?" "I wouldn't know," Bella sobbed. "They keep saying something about funding rounds and equity agreements. I don't understand a word of it." "Sis, how did you used to?" She cut herself off mid-sentence. I tightened my grip on the phone. She almost let it slip. She wanted to ask how I had dealt with this kind of thing in my past life. "Pay more attention to his work," I said flatly. "At the very least, remember the names of his colleagues and what project he's currently working on." "Who can remember all that?" Bella said irritably. "Yesterday, his secretary called. I mentioned Mr. Wong by accident, but apparently it was someone named Lee. Nathan yelled at me for embarrassing him. When I got home, Ethan was in the study going over strategy materials for the upcoming competition. I made him a cup of tea and set it by his hand. He naturally pulled me down to sit beside him. "Help me look at this tactical setup," he said. That simple act of trust warmed my heart. On the last day of September, Ethan was officially appointed as the team leader for the military district competition. During the announcement, the political commissar specifically praised his innovative thinking in tactical planning. At the celebration banquet, Ethan's direct superior, Colonel Chen, was flushed from drinking. "Ethan, something's clicked with you lately, huh?" He laughed. "That flanking tactic in the last drill and this new multi-unit coordination plan, both sharp ideas." Ethan glanced at me and smiled. "I have a good woman at home." Colonel Chen patted my shoulder. "I've heard all about you, Hannah. Captain Lee says your braised pork is out of this world. I'll have to try it myself one day." As everyone laughed, my phone buzzed. It was a photo from Bella. She sat alone at a high-end restaurant with 2 full place settings in front of her. Anniversary dinner, the message read. Nathan said he had a last-minute meeting. She added a crying emoji. I locked the screen. In my past life, Nathan really did have a meeting today, just not a business one. He used their anniversary as an excuse to meet his mistress at a hotel. I had pretended not to know, even prepared a gift, and waited for him until late into the night. On the way home, Ethan suddenly said, "The competition next month is in Nanjing. Family members can come, if you want to." Of course, I answered without hesitation. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I opened my notebook again. Flipping a few pages ahead, one entry had been marked in red ink. November 2015, Lu Group's capital chain crisis. Nathan turns to Zhou Investments for help. I gently closed the notebook. Bella's hard days were only just beginning. The desk lamp cast a soft, golden glow on Ethan's profile. In front of him lay the 7th revision of his battle plan. The interregional competition was just 2 weeks away, and he had only been sleeping 4 hours a night for the past 3 days. I quietly set down a cup of honey grapefruit tea. He looked up and rubbed his tired, bloodshot eyes. "Did I wake you?" I pulled up a chair beside him. "Where are you stuck in the plan?" He pointed at a section on the map. "Red team will definitely place forces here. A frontal assault would be too costly, but the alternate route would take too long." I studied the terrain. "This area," I pointed at the western edge, "is prone to landslides, right?" Ethan paused, surprised. "How did you know?" "There was a landslide during a drill last year, wasn't there?" I replied lightly. "Just a hunch." "If Red Team expects you to take the long way around, they'll probably set up an ambush there." Ethan suddenly shot to his feet, his chair screeching loudly against the floor. He pulled me into a tight hug. "Hannah, you're a genius." He smelled faintly of pine and sweat, his heartbeat strong and fast. The next morning, Ethan headed straight to the command post to revise the plan. While cleaning the study, I found a note he had left on the desk. "I might be home late tonight. Don't wait for dinner. P.S. Mrs. Chen invited you to her tea gathering." There was even a crooked little smiley face drawn in the corner. I couldn't help but smile. It felt so much more genuine than Nathan's cold, templated work messages. Colonel Chen's home was in the officer's residence building. When I arrived, 5 or 6 military wives were already seated in the living room. As soon as I entered, a middle-aged woman with permed hair waved warmly. "You must be Hannah. My husband talks about you all the time." "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Zhao," I said, addressing her correctly. My knowledge of military families from my past life at the Lu household was finally coming in handy. The conversation flowed from children's education to district gossip. I chimed in at just the right moments, engaged, but not overbearing. When the topic shifted to the upcoming military district anniversary celebration, Mrs. Zhou suddenly turned to me. "Hannah, what kind of program is Ethan's unit preparing?" "They're rehearsing now," I replied smoothly. "They're adapting the competition strategy into a tactical skit." In reality, Ethan hadn't mentioned any such thing. In my past life, there had indeed been a performance showcase at the military district's anniversary celebration. The winners often left a strong impression on the higher-ups. As soon as I got home, I texted Ethan about it. He replied quickly, "How did you know there'd be a performance showcase?" "The official notice just came out this morning." "Just a guess," I answered. "Don't they hold one every year?" That evening, Ethan came home with a thick stack of documents. "The political office is requiring every competing unit to prepare a program," he said. "Perfect timing. We can adapt the military competition scenario into a skit." He looked at me with a complicated expression. "Hannah, sometimes you're so accurate it's scary." A week later, during the performance showcase, Ethan's unit skit won the Best Creativity Award. After the performance, a white-haired general came up to shake Ethan's hand. "You've got ideas, young man. Who designed this program?" "It was the collective effort of our unit," Ethan replied humbly. "But my wife contributed quite a bit too." Very good, the general said, patting his shoulder. "A husband and wife working together can accomplish anything." He looked thoroughly pleased. The evening banquet was held at the district guest house. I chose a navy blue dress, elegant without being showy. When Ethan saw me, his eyes lit up. "You look beautiful." At the banquet, I noticed several military wives subtly observing my manners. "Ethan's wife has such poise." Vice Commander Zhao commented to Colonel Chen, his voice just loud enough for me to hear. As he spoke, a stir rippled through the banquet hall. A familiar figure staggered inside. Bella wore a revealing evening gown, her cheeks unnaturally flushed. Behind her stood Nathan, and a balding middle-aged man. "This is our company's latest investment proposal, Mr. Wang," Nathan's polished voice floated across the room. Bella's eyes were unfocused, the wine glass in her hand trembling. The moment she spotted me, her eyes widened in shock. Nathan finally noticed us too. His face immediately darkened. He yanked Bella toward him roughly. "Mr. Wang, let's talk over there." Bella stumbled and her wine glass shattered on the marble floor. The sharp sound drew more stares. She tried to say something, but Nathan shot her a vicious glare that made her fall silent. "Isn't that the heir to the Lu Group?" Colonel Chen's wife whispered. "Bringing his drunk wife to a business meeting. What is he thinking?" I tightened my grip on my own glass. In my past life, by this point, I had already started accompanying Nathan to meet clients. There was even a time I drank so much I ended up with a bleeding stomach. Ethan gently touched my hand. "Do you want to check on her?" I shook my head. Bella chose this path. She has to walk it to the end. After the banquet, Vice Commander Zhao asked Ethan to stay back for a private conversation. While I waited in the corridor, Mrs. Zhao came over and whispered, "Word is, after the competition, there's a spot for advanced study at the National Defense University. Commander Zhao really thinks highly of Ethan." My heart skipped a beat. Normally, people selected for that program moved up the ranks quickly afterward. "Thank you for the tip," I said sincerely. She patted my hand. "You're so much better than those wives who just flaunt brand names. Colonel Chen told me Ethan consults with you on every plan these days." "I just offer a few ideas," I replied modestly. When Ethan came out, his eyes were shining. "Vice Commander Zhao wants me to write a paper on information-based warfare." On the ride home, he couldn't stop talking about his ideas for the paper. Late that night, my phone buzzed. It was a voice message from Bella. The background was filled with the sound of vomiting. "Sis, I can't take it anymore," she cried. "He told me to keep that disgusting old man company." I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Eventually I replied, "Do you need me to call you a car home?" "No," she sniffled. "My mother-in-law said if I mess up another deal, she'll cut off my credit card." I set my phone aside. Outside the window, a pale moon hung over the military base's watchtower, cold and bright. The day the acceptance letter from the National Defense University arrived, I was at the sink, dry heaving. A week of morning sickness had already made me lose 3 pounds. My face in the mirror was as pale as paper. "Hannah!" Ethan's voice came from outside the bathroom door, followed by urgent knocking. "Open up." I wiped my mouth and opened the door. He stood there holding a large craft envelope, his eyes shining with excitement. I got in. Vice Commander Zhao called personally to confirm. I didn't even have time to respond before another wave of nausea surged up. Ethan's smile froze as he gently held my shoulders. "Is it? Those 2 red lines on the test stick?" His guess was confirmed. Ethan immediately knelt on the bathroom tiles, pressing his face against my still flat stomach. He wrapped his arms around my waist like a child who'd just been handed a bag of candy. "Double blessing," he murmured. When he looked up, the corners of his eyes were slightly wet. "I'm going to tell the political commissar today. I'm withdrawing from the program." "Don't talk nonsense," I tugged on his ear. "This is a rare opportunity. But I don't want to leave you alone." His warm palm rested gently over my lower abdomen. "My mom can come take care of me," I cut him off. "And if not, we can hire a nanny. Ethan Carter, if you dare throw away this opportunity, I'll take the baby and move back to my parents' house." He stared at me for a few seconds before suddenly bursting into laughter. "Hannah, you're adorable when you threaten people." In the end, we struck a deal. He would attend the training program, but had to return home every weekend. His mom would move in and stay with me until the training was over. When Mrs. Carter arrived, she brought 3 hens and a bundle of traditional herbs, instantly turning the kitchen into an herbal soup kitchen. The whole apartment smelled of angelica root and goji berries. After Ethan's father passed, I relied on herbal remedies to get through it, she said, as she skimmed foam from the broth. "Now you're eating for 2, you need the best nutrition." I sat on a low stool peeling garlic. Sunlight filtered through the gauzy kitchen curtains, casting a warm glow on the silver strands at her temples. After Ethan left for training, he sent me texts every day, sometimes photos of his class notes, other times complaints about the inedible cafeteria food. Every evening during our video calls, the first thing he asked was always, "How many times did you throw up today?" On weekends when he came home, he brought stacks of military theory books and would read aloud from them before bed. "For the baby," he said. One late night I woke up to find him softly stroking my belly, whispering, "Daddy's going to protect you and Mommy, no matter what." Halfway through the program, Ethan was selected to represent the school in a joint military exercise. The night before his deployment, he stayed up organizing materials. As I handed him a glass of warm milk, I said, "What if you added an electronic warfare component to this plan?" He raised an eyebrow. "You understand electronic warfare?" "I've read a few articles," I said nonchalantly. In truth, one of Nathan's past mistresses had been an expert in electronic operations, and she never stopped bragging at the dinner parties. Ethan, deep in thought, began modifying the plan. 2 weeks later, the blue team, his unit, won by a landslide. His electronic interference squad was rated as a key strategic asset. "The vice principal spoke to me today," Ethan said excitedly over video call. "There's a chance I'll be assigned directly to the command department after graduation." I rubbed my now noticeably swollen belly and smiled. The next day, at a prenatal checkup, the doctor grinned and said, "Twins. Healthy and strong." I immediately texted Ethan. He replied with a flood of exclamation marks, then a single line, "I've submitted a request to transfer back to my original post." "Are you crazy?" I called him right away. "The command department's too busy," he said, sounding almost aggrieved. "I want to be there when the babies are born. I want to watch them grow up. My dad died early. I know what it's like to grow up without a father." Just then, a bugle call echoed from his end. He quickly said, "I love you," and hung up. I held the phone in my hand, my heart soft and aching like sugar melting in warm water. When Mrs. Carter found out, her eyes turned red. Just like his father, so stubborn. By the 6th month, my belly had grown enormous. Ethan had finished his training and returned home, now walking with me every evening without fail. The older women in the residential compound all praised him. "Captain Carter is a model husband," they said with admiration. One weekend afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Bella standing there, her belly even bigger than mine. Behind her were 3 little girls, quiet and timid. "Sis," she said, her face pale and waxy, a dark bruise under one eye. "Can I borrow some money?" I hurried them inside. The 3 girls sat stiffly at the edge of the sofa, but their eyes were locked on the fruit platter. "What happened?" I asked gently, handing each of the girls an apple. Bella's tears suddenly burst forth like a broken dam. "The Liu family is finished. Nathan's investments failed, and now debt collectors show up at our door every day. My mother-in-law said if I don't give birth to a boy this time." Her voice choked and trailed off. I noticed faint bruises circling her wrists, marks that looked like they'd been left by restraints. "Did Nathan hit you?" I asked softly. Bella's whole body flinched. She instinctively shielded her stomach. He's just under a lot of pressure." By the time Ethan came home, Bella had already left with the kids. I had given her some cash, which she nervously stuffed into her undershirt like she was stealing it. "I heard about the Liu group," Ethan said as he took off his military jacket. "They took on private fundraising. Now the capital chain has collapsed. It's a huge mess." I leaned back on the sofa, the twins kicking wildly inside me. In my past life, the Liu family business had been thriving at this time, because I'd secretly helped broker their rescue deal with Zhao Investments. Ethan crouched down and pressed his ear to my belly. "No matter what happens," he said, "as long as we're together, that's enough." I stroked his short, bristly hair. "Yeah, being together is enough. We don't need luxury homes, fancy cars, or meaningless reputation." Ethan's transfer order arrived in my 7th month. He was officially promoted to Regimental Chief of Staff and granted the rank of Major. On the day the order was announced, the whole regiment applauded. Colonel Chen laughed. "Once those twins are born, we'll throw a proper celebration." The day before Bella's due date, she called again, crying so hard her words were barely coherent. "It's another girl." Nathan didn't even look at her. He just walked away. My mother-in-law is demanding a divorce. As I listened to the newborn crying on the other end of the line, my chest tightened. Then, one early morning, labor pains hit me suddenly. Ethan reacted like a firefighter. He grabbed the hospital bag in seconds. Mrs. Carter insisted on bringing a jar of ginseng soup. Giving birth is a battle. You'll need your strength. Outside the delivery room, I heard Ethan arguing with the doctor. Prioritize the mother. If anything happens, save my wife first. 12 grueling hours later, our healthy boy-girl twins were born. Ethan's eyes were red as he cut the umbilical cords, then kissed me hard on the forehead. Hannah, you're my hero. The nurse brought over the cleaned-up babies. The girl looked just like Ethan. The boy looked like me. Ethan cradled his daughter gently, brushing her tiny cheek with his finger. Daddy's here, he whispered. During my hospital stay, Ethan learned to change diapers and make formula. One night, I woke up to find him bent over the crib, whispering, Daddy will always protect you and Mommy. I swore to myself that when we were discharged, we'd start anew. On the day we came home, there was a big red banner hanging in front of the family housing building. Congratulations to Chief of Staff Carter on the birth of twins. The hallway was stacked with baby gifts from neighbors, including handmade baby shoes. Mrs. Carter gave us the master bedroom and moved into the nursery. You two need the space for rest and work, she said. At my age, sleeping less is no big deal. Late at night, during feedings, I often saw Ethan quietly tiptoe into the nursery, only to return with a proud grin. Mom slept through it. I changed the diaper myself. She didn't even stir. The twins' 1-month celebration was set for Army Day, August 1st. Ethan said it was perfect timing, a true double blessing. The invitations had barely gone out when I received a call from Bella. Sis? Her voice was faint, like it came from very far away. Can I come? Just me. The kids are too loud. Of course, I paused. Are you okay? There was a long silence on the other end. The Liu family's bankrupt. Nathan's gone. After I hung up, I looked at the two sleeping babies in their crib. We had started from the same place, but ended up in completely different worlds. Fate was never a simple multiple-choice question. We held the twin celebration in the military dining hall. Ethan had asked the head cook to help, and they laid out 20 tables. I wore a loose-fitting red dress, holding our daughter, little Tang, in my arms. Ethan stood beside me at the entrance, proudly holding our son, little Zhou, as we welcomed each guest with joy. What a lucky guy you are, Chief Carter. Ethan's fellow officers took turns coming over to see the babies, stuffing red envelopes into our hands as gifts. Ethan's grin stretched so wide it nearly reached his ears as he kept insisting, No, our daughter looks like her mom. It's our son who looks like me. Sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the dining hall, casting a warm glow over the red-clothed banquet tables. I gently rocked our baby girl in my arms. Her little cheeks were rosy, and once in a while she'd break into a toothless grin. Every time she smiled, Ethan would beam and say, See? My little princess is smiling at me. Colonel Chen and his wife came over to offer their congratulations, each handing one of the babies a red envelope. Ethan, looks like you've got it all. Career and family, both flourishing, the colonel said. Ethan had just opened his mouth to respond when a stir broke out at the entrance. Bella stood there in a wrinkled dress, clutching a cheap plastic bag. She was so thin her cheekbones jutted out sharply, making her eyes look unnaturally large, full of unease and envy. She walked over slowly, her voice rough and sandpaper-like. This is a gift for the babies. Inside the plastic bag were 2 pairs of baby socks. The tags were still attached, but the fabric was clearly cheap. I accepted them and said gently, Thank you. We'll definitely use these. Her eyes landed on the twins in my arms. Her lips trembled. They're beautiful. A boy and a girl? You're so lucky. Ethan, ever gracious, said, Come on in and have a seat. We're about to start. Bella scurried into the hall like a frightened rabbit. I noticed the soles of her shoes were coming apart, the heels worn down beyond repair. Once the banquet began, Ethan stood on stage holding our son. Dressed in his neatly pressed uniform with his shiny epaulets glinting under the lights, he said, Thank you all for coming to celebrate the first month of our daughter and son. His voice cracked slightly. I don't know what I've done to deserve a wife like mine, or children this healthy and perfect. The hall erupted in applause. From the corner of my eye, I saw Bella sitting alone in the back, staring fixedly at Ethan on stage. Her fingers were clenched together so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. During the toasts, Bella suddenly sidled up next to me. I was feeding little Tang and looked up when she whispered, "Sis?" Nathan ran. "What?" I asked, stunned. "His company went bankrupt," she said, her voice tight with rage. "He's buried in debt. Last week in the middle of the night, he packed his stuff and left. Didn't even leave a note." Her eyes glistened with tears, but the dominant emotion behind them was anger. I noticed a bruise around her neck, like someone had grabbed her. "Where are you living now?" I asked. "My mother-in-law?" Bella sneered. "That witch mortgaged the house. I'm staying with the kids in one of Nathan's old properties in the suburbs, no heating, nothing." I remembered how, in my past life, Nathan had also faced bankruptcy. I had pulled strings through Joe Investments to get him the funds to survive. Back then, he held me and said, "Marrying you was the best thing that ever happened to me." But soon after, he was in bed with his secretary. After the banquet, Bella lingered, hesitant to leave. When the last guest had gone, she suddenly dropped to her knees and clung to my leg. "Sis, please, lend me 100,000 yuan. The kids need to eat. They need to go to school." Startled, I nearly dropped the baby. Ethan rushed over to take little Tang from me. "Let's go talk over there," I told her quietly. "I don't have that much in cash," I said, helping her up. "And even if I did, the Liu family situation isn't something a small amount can fix." 50,000 then," she cried, clutching my hand so hard her nails dug into my skin. "I know Ethan just got promoted. You guys have money." In the end, I gave her 20,000 yuan and told her she didn't need to pay it back. As she grabbed the money, the way her eyes lit up reminded me of the moment, back in our past life, when she'd plunged a knife into me for this very same reason. "You're so damn lucky," she said, stuffing the bills into her bra. Her voice was bitter, venomous. "No matter who you marry, your life turns out perfect." Ethan drove her to the train station. When he came back, he said quietly, "She cried the whole way there. She said she regrets fighting you over Nathan." I didn't respond as I rocked little Joe in my arms, trying to calm his crying. Regret? The only thing she regretted was betting on the wrong man to make money. That night, I opened an education fund account for each of Bella's 5 daughters. I arranged automatic monthly deposits to ensure they would all have a chance at school. 3 months later, while I was buying formula in the baby section at the mall, I sensed someone following me. When I turned around, I spotted Bella ducking behind a shelf in a panic. "Come out," I said aloud to no one. She shuffled out slowly, holding her youngest daughter, thin as a kitten, crying with a voice barely audible. "Why are you following me?" I asked, then stuffed a few cans of formula into her cart. Her eyes turned red. "I went to the bank. I know it's you sending money for the kids." Her voice trembled. "Why? After everything I did to you?" "The kids are innocent," I said simply. Then I grabbed a few packs of diapers and tossed them in as well. Suddenly, she grabbed my wrist. "Sis, Nathan's a monster. He took everything. My jewelry, even my wedding ring." I looked down at her rough, worn hands and was reminded of my past life, when Nathan had taken my jewelry piece by piece. He'd claimed they were gifts for clients' wives, when in reality they were for his mistress. "You need to find a job," I said with a sigh. "A friend of mine runs a daycare. I can refer you as a caregiver." Bella yanked her hand back like I'd burned her. "Me? Serve other people's kids? I'm from the Liu family." "The Liu family doesn't exist anymore," I said calmly. "You need to eat. Your kids need to go to school." Her face twisted through several expressions before she forced out, "I'll think about it." Then she hurried off without even saying thank you. When I got home, Ethan was reading a fairy tale to the twins. Little Tang drooled on his chest while Little Jaw stared intently at the illustrations. "You're back." Ethan looked up with a smile. Zhao rolled over for the first time today. I set the formula down and kissed both of the babies. Ethan smelled of gentle soap and baby lotion, a scent so warm and reassuring. "Hannah," Ethan said more seriously this time. "I'm going on a work trip to Beijing next week. Might be gone for 2 weeks." I folded little Tang's onesie. "Mom's here to help. We'll be fine." "It's for a Central Military Commission meeting," he said in a lower voice. "There's a chance I'll be reassigned to a headquarters position." I looked at him, stunned. In my past life, that transfer had marked the start of a meteoric rise. That's good news, I said, trying to sound calm even as my heart raced. Ethan scratched his head. But it means living in Beijing full-time. I was thinking of turning it down. Don't be ridiculous. My voice rose sharply, startling little Zhao. I quickly patted him gently, softening my tone. Do you know how many people would kill for an opportunity like that? But the kids are still young. We'll move with you, I interrupted. Ethan, don't give up your career for the family. You'll just end up losing both. He stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly smiled. Hannah, sometimes I think you're more mature than I am. He placed the twins into their cradle and wrapped his arms around me. Then let's go to Beijing together. I leaned against his shoulder, breathing in that warm, familiar scent. Being together as a family was all that mattered. The appointment came sooner than expected. Ethan was promoted to deputy director of a division under the Central Military Commission, bypassing standard procedure. The announcement ceremony was held at the Defense Department itself. Vice Commander Zhao attended in person, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. 35 and already at deputy division level, there are few in the whole army who can match you. The celebration was hosted at the military district's guest house. I wore a tailored navy blue suit dress, my hair neatly tied back. Ethan stood tall beside me in full dress uniform, the stars on his epaulets gleaming brightly. People came over one after another to toast him. Somewhere along the way, the respectful Miss Yu had been replaced by Mrs. Carter. Comrade Hannah's contributions are no small thing, one retired general chuckled. I heard Deputy Director Carter's proposal on information-based warfare. Wasn't that your work? I gave a modest smile. I just helped proofread it for typos. In truth, the key ideas behind that proposal had come from a drunken conversation in my past life, between Nathan's mistress and a military insider. At the time, I just assumed that man was bragging. I never imagined that after being reborn, his drunken ramblings would become so useful. The banquet didn't end until late at night. Ethan had drunk a little too much and held my hand tightly the whole ride home. Hannah, without you, I wouldn't be where I am today. Outside the window, the lights of Beijing shimmered like a river of stars. Our new home was a 2-story detached house in the military compound. On moving day, Ethan's mom was in the courtyard holding little Zhao, directing soldiers as they arranged the furniture. Little Tang was lying on the freshly laid carpet, chewing on her teether. Mom, take a break. I handed her a cup of tea. She shook her head. These old bones can still move. Her eyes welled up as she looked at Ethan, who was on a ladder hanging the curtains. If only his father could have seen this day. Just then my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. When I picked up, it was Bella's oldest daughter, Tina. Auntie, Mommy's burning up and talking nonsense. I glanced at my busy family and lowered my voice. Did you take her to the hospital? No, we don't have the money for the deposit. Her voice trembled. The little ones are crying from hunger. Half an hour later, I stood in front of a crumbling house in the suburbs. The paint was peeling from the walls, and plastic sheets had been nailed over the broken windows. When I opened the door, the smell of mildew and urine hit me like a wave. Bella was lying on a yellowed mattress, her cheeks flushed with fever. The 5 girls huddled around her. Tina held the youngest in her arms, while the 3 in the middle huddled together for warmth. There was no heat, and the girls were dressed in thin clothes. Their little fingers were purple from the cold. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I touched Bella's forehead. It was scorching hot. When she saw it was me, she suddenly burst into tears. Sis, I was wrong. I never should have fought you. Don't say that now. I took off my coat and wrapped the smallest girl in it. Tina, get your mom's insurance card. We're going to the hospital. Bella struggled to sit up. I don't have insurance. It's been lapsed for half a year. I called an ambulance immediately, and then had Ethan's driver come pick up the kids. Bella was hospitalized for 3 days. I hired a nurse to look after her and temporarily moved the 5 girls into our guest rooms. Let them stay, Ethan said as he came back from shopping, carrying bags of new clothes and backpacks for the kids. We have enough space. I shook my head. Bella won't agree. And sure enough, when Bella was discharged and saw her kids clean, well-fed, and sitting around our dining table, her face instantly darkened. Sis, what's this supposed to mean? Mommy, Auntie gave us new backpacks, the youngest girl said innocently. Bella yanked her daughter to her side. Shut up. Then she turned to me. Don't think a little charity gives you the right to mock us. Ethan frowned and was about to speak, but I placed a hand over his. The kids need to go to school. Tina's grades are good. She could test into a top middle school. Don't you dare meddle, Bella shrieked, her voice hysterical. Haven't you taken enough from me already? You stole my whole life. She grabbed the girls and stormed out without even taking their coats. The youngest looked back at me, her eyes filled with longing. Let her cool off, Ethan sighed. She'll come back when she thinks it through. But when Bella returned, things were even worse. It was snowing heavily that day. A soldier called from the gate to say there was a woman with children asking for me. Bella stood outside the sentry post, her down coat filthy and indistinguishable in color. The 5 girls clustered behind her like frightened chicks. As soon as she saw me, she fell to her knees in the snow. Sis, please take us in, the landlord kicked us out. Ethan was at a meeting. I asked the soldier to help bring them inside. A hot bath, warm food, clean clothes. The girls were soon asleep in the guest rooms. Bella sat on the living room couch, her eyes swollen red. Nathan's gone for good. She clutched a mug of hot tea, her hands trembling. He racked up over $3 million in loan shark debt. They said they'd take the kids as collateral. I was silent for a moment. Then I said, you can stay here for now, but under 2 conditions. Bella suddenly looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. First, I said, the children must go to school like normal. Second, you need to find a job, even if it's something basic. Her face shifted. I could go work at that preschool your friend runs. You wouldn't be helping my friend, I said, looking her straight in the eyes. You'd be helping yourself. Bella, you're 30. It's time to grow up. She lowered her head. The steam rising from her tea blurred her expression. The first few days went smoothly. Bella took the kids to a nearby school every morning and tried to help out with chores afterward. But things fell apart on a Friday night. Ethan was away on a field assignment, and I returned early from a military wives meeting. When I pushed open the bedroom door, I found Bella standing at my vanity, holding the jade bracelet Ethan's grandmother had given me. I was just looking, she stammered, hastily hiding it behind her back. I stepped in and locked the door behind me. Put it down. Bella's face went from red to white. She suddenly burst out, wrenching herself free. Why do you get everything good? That bracelet should have been mine. Ethan should have been mine. The good life should have been mine. You were the one who gave up on Ethan, I said calmly. Bella screamed as if I'd stabbed her. Don't act so smug. You just got lucky and married well. I looked at her twisted expression and felt an overwhelming fatigue. In both this life and the last, she always believed others' happiness was just dumb luck, never once seeing her own flaws. I'll have someone take you to the relocation apartment in the suburbs tomorrow, I said, turning toward the door. I'll send money for the kids every month until they're grown. Bella suddenly lunged at me, grabbing my bag. Where's the money? I know you have cash. We struggled, and the jade bracelet dropped onto the carpet with a soft thud. Ethan's mother rushed in at the noise. Only then did Bella let go, panting heavily and glaring at me. I'm fine, I said as I smoothed down my disheveled hair. Bella's moving out tomorrow. That night, I spoke to Ethan on the phone. He was quiet for a while. Want me to send someone? No, I replied, watching our twins sleeping peacefully. Just rent her a place. Send the support regularly, but don't let her come into the compound again. The next day, Bella and her daughters were relocated to a 2-bedroom apartment in the southern suburbs. It had simple furnishings, enough for a decent life. I transferred 30,000 yuan into her account to get started. A social worker would check in weekly to make sure the children were cared for. As I saw them off, I said, if school ever gets disrupted, I'll apply for guardianship. Bella glared at me with hatred, but just as the car door closed, her eyes welled with tears. 3 months later, the social worker reported Bella had taken a job as a cashier at a supermarket, and the children were attending school regularly. 6 months after that, I heard she'd started taking night classes in accounting. When Ethan's promotion order came down, the house filled with people offering congratulations. Deputy Commander Zhao, personally announced his appointment as Chief of Staff for a regional military command, along with his promotion to Brigadier General. Hannah deserves a lot of credit, the old general joked warmly. Every report from Chief Ethan is so solid, I hear you've had a hand in it. Amid the kind laughter, I looked out the window. The spring sunlight lit up the crabapple tree we had just planted in the yard. Ethan quietly slipped his hand into mine. What are you thinking about? Fate, I said, squeezing his warm palm in return. And how life doesn't give us what-ifs, only results. He leaned close, whispering with a smile, then I think our result turned out pretty well. I glanced at the twin babies babbling in their stroller, the elders chatting in the living room, and finally the family photo on the bookshelf. Ethan in his general's uniform, me holding the kids, and Ethan's mother smiling kindly behind us. Yes, I whispered. It turned out beautifully. Many years later, on Qingming Festival, I drove alone to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city. In the trunk were 2 bouquets of white chrysanthemums, one for my father, one for my mother. Little Tang and little Zhou were in elementary school by then. Today, they were with Ethan, visiting the military museum. The spring breeze stirred the fresh green willow branches as I stepped into the quiet memorial park. There weren't many people in the cemetery. I made my way through the familiar path to my parents' tombstone, only to stop short. Bella was kneeling there, her shoulders trembling slightly. She looked a little heavier than the last time we met, dressed in a plain gray coat with her hair tied back casually. When she heard footsteps, she turned around in alarm. Her face was streaked with tears. I didn't know you'd come today, she stammered, hurriedly wiping her face with her sleeve. I come every year at this time. I placed the flowers down and looked at the offerings she'd brought. A few apples and a pack of cigarettes. Dad had loved to smoke when he was alive. Bella stood up and I noticed the mud on the knees of her pants. She looked older now. There were fine lines at the corners of her eyes, but the bitterness that once lived in her gaze was gone. How are the kids? I broke the silence. Tina got into the teacher's college, she said quietly. The others are doing okay too, thanks to the education fund you've been sending. I nodded. Over the years, I'd made sure tuition was paid for all 5 of my nieces, but I never gave Bella cash directly. I'd heard she worked at a supermarket during the day and did bookkeeping at night, raising the kids on her own. She reached into her bag and pulled out a plastic bag. I knitted these for the kids. I'm not very good at it, but it's real wool. I took the bag. Inside were 2 tiny sweaters, one pink and one blue. The stitching was uneven, but it was clear she'd put effort into them. Thanks, I said, a little surprised. I didn't know you could knit. I learned in night school, she muttered, rubbing her rough fingertips. I also do some hand sewing for a clothing factory now, just to make ends meet. Sunlight broke through the clouds and lit up my parents' headstone. We stood side by side in silence for a while. Hannah, Bella said suddenly, I'm sorry. A breeze rustled the chrysanthemums on the grave, making their petals tremble. Back at the birthday banquet years ago, her voice caught in her throat, I completely lost my mind. I took a deep breath. Since my second chance at life, this was the first time either of us had openly acknowledged that bloody night. It's in the past now, I said, looking at the photos of our parents on the tombstone. How's your life these days? It's okay, she said with a strained smile. Tina's going to graduate next year and start working. Things feel a little more hopeful. She paused, then added, They caught Luke last year. He was working as a thug in a casino in Macau. I didn't comment. In the distance, someone was crying softly over a grave. You were right, Bella said. Just picking the right person isn't enough. You have to be strong yourself. I turned to her and saw clarity in her eyes. The years had smoothed away the chaos and left something real behind. The kids can come visit sometime, I said. Tang and Zhou haven't met their cousins yet. Her eyes lit up, but dimmed just as quickly. It's better if we don't go to the compound. It's not appropriate. I have a small apartment in the city. I handed her a business card. That's the address and phone number. She took it, her fingers trembling. Thank you. Really, thank you. We left the cemetery, one after the other. Parked beside my car was an old electric scooter. In the front basket sat a supermarket employee cap, probably Bella's. I'm off, she said, clumsily climbing onto the scooter. If they don't like the sweaters, don't feel bad about not using them. Bella, I called out as she started to leave. Next Wednesday is Tang's birthday. She froze for a second, then nodded earnestly. I'll remember. On the drive back, Ethan called. In the background, I could hear the kids chattering excitedly, their voices overlapping. Mom? Tang's voice came through clearly as she grabbed the phone. Dad said we get to ride a real tank. It's a tour of a tank, sweetie, I said, laughing. Ethan chuckled and corrected them. We're just visiting the tank exhibit tonight. So, what do you want for dinner? I'll cook, I said. How about hot pot? It's still a bit chilly out. After hanging up, I glanced at the plastic bag on the passenger seat, pulled out the blue sweater, and noticed a small tag sewn inside the collar. The embroidery, uneven and crooked, read, Peace and Joy. The same words were etched on the jade bracelet Ethan's mother had given me years ago. When I got home, Ethan was in the kitchen slicing lamb for the hot pot. The twins were nearby, kneading dough like tiny chefs. As soon as she saw me, Tang ran over, proudly holding a lumpy mass in her hands. Mom, look, I made a tank. Wash your hands first, I said, laughing as I dodged her flour-covered fingers. Where's Dad? In the kitchen, Joe mumbled, not even lifting his head as he molded his own dough tank. Ethan wore an apron and was focused on chopping scallions. At 35, he looked even more grounded and charming than the day we first met. The golden star on his epaulette gleamed under the kitchen light. You're back, he said with a soft smile. Was it crowded at the cemetery? Not too bad. I set my bag down, hesitated a moment, then added, I ran into Bella. Ethan paused for just a second. How is she? She's changed, I said, taking out the 2 little sweaters. She even knitted these for the kids. He picked one up and examined it. His expression softened. The stitches are pretty solid. After dinner, once the kids were asleep, Ethan and I sat on the balcony with cups of tea. The April night sky was unusually clear, with a few stars flickering above us. She said Luke was arrested, I said suddenly. Ethan nodded. I heard. It wasn't just debt, there were fraud charges too. He looked at peace with the news. I sipped my tea. She also said, life isn't just about picking the right person. Ethan laughed. That sounds like something you'd say. I did say it. I leaned against his shoulder. What if I'd chosen Luke back then? He thought for a moment. You'd have had a better life than Bella, but not better than now. Why? Because you're capable. He playfully pinched my nose. And someone like Luke doesn't deserve that. I smiled, then suddenly remembered something. Oh, Tang's birthday. Let's invite her cousins. Good idea, Ethan agreed right away. And we can give Bella the key to the apartment we're not using. It's close to the kids' school. I looked at him, surprised. That apartment had always been in the back of my mind for Bella, but I hadn't told him yet. What? He raised an eyebrow. You think I didn't notice you've been supporting her kids all these years? Moonlight bathed us in a quiet, gentle glow. I thought of the final moment before my rebirth. Bella's twisted face. The glint of a knife. Of our first encounter in this life when she proudly declared it was her turn to marry a rich man. Of all the envy, the resentment, the struggle she had waded through to get to the calmness of today. Life truly isn't a simple multiple-choice question. With the same starting point and the same opportunities, Bella and I had walked 2 completely different paths.